We understand the dilemma, but this cannot go on week to week and month to month. We need to pass a bill for the entire year and come back to it. I see the senator from New Jersey, and I'll yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from New Jersey.
I appreciate the distinguished senator from Louisiana's passion on this and her personal experience in Louisiana, consequences of disaster. And she speaks from firsthand knowledge and speaks for all of us in this respect. Mr. President, I rise today because we as a nation have always come together to help each other in times of crisis without question, without politics. In my 20 years between the House and the Senate, I never questioned, in the midst of a disaster somewhere in the country, which fortunately for the most part has not been New Jersey, about casting my vote to support those fellow Americans who found themselves in urgent need because of natural disasters, having nothing to do with any control they had whatsoever. This is not a time to politicize disaster aid. It is not who we are or what we expect this nation to be. Our goal when disaster strikes is to unleash the full force of the federal government to help families in trouble and communities in ruin, not to score some political points by slowing relief and calling it responsible fiscal policy. In the wake of a storm, when the flood waters rise, when the winds blow, when the storm surge rushes in, we shouldn't be rallying our political base. We should be rallying the full force of emergency responders to help. In the last few weeks, the East Coast has suffered an earthquake, a hurricane, and some of the worst flooding my state has seen in years, 100-year flooding. I received a letter from a constituent in Moores Landing in Monmouth County who wrote, "Dear Senator Menendez, I live in Moores Landing, a development of homes in Howell Township, Monmouth County, New Jersey. Our community is in great need of assistance. One section of our community was devastated by flooding from an overflow of the Manasquan Inlet on August 20 and 21st. Homes and property were destroyed. The families and lives of those homeowners were terribly disrupted. Then after the first calamity, Hurricane Irene brought further destruction to the same section of our community. But in addition to that repeated damage, Irene brought damage to a second section of our community. Hurricane Irene, in addition to the added homes and property damage, forced many of our residents to be evacuated in order to avoid drowning in the rushing floodwaters. This second catastrophe added to the misery and hardship suffered by our affected homeowners who lost their furniture, their carpets, their flooring, everything on the first floor of their homes, their furnaces, air conditioning units, and all of them have to tear down their water-damaged walls to avoid mold and dry out their homes. All this devastation and loss comes at a time when our people are already finding it difficult to make ends meet. These people have no money to take on the added costs of repair. Now, there is no one who would even buy their homes. So they are stuck with a true nightmare scenario. No money to fix things and no way to sell their homes. We need your help. I understand federal funding from FEMA might be available, and we urgently need your assistance in securing these funds for our neighbors so that these people can move on with their lives. Mr. President, that constituent, a fellow American, deserves to know that her government will be there to help, that relief is on the way, not held up in Congress to satisfy some ideology or political agenda. When disaster strikes, Americans come together. We do not hesitate. We do not ask why. We do not wait. We rush to our neighbors and do all we can to help them rebuild. After the damage and flooding Irene caused, we came together as we always do, as a community, each of us working together to help others. Now, I had the opportunity to tour the flooded areas of New Jersey with the Army Corps of Engineers, and then we went to Paterson. This is a picture of Paterson, New Jersey, where These responders are on a boat with the President and Governor Christie of my state to assess that damage. After 5 days of flooding, there were still those who were homeless, trying to put the pieces of their lives back together. As we flew over the area with the President that day, we could see mud lines on homes indicating how high the floodwaters had reached. And then, tragically, we saw home after home where everything, up and down some streets, all the personal belongings of residents had been put out as trash, cherished pieces of their lives lost or ruined. Paterson was particularly hard hit. Ironic, the river that once fueled the economy of Paterson washed out bridges, dams along the river were badly damaged, power was knocked out for days, and with the latest rains, flooding again took place even after Hurricane Irene. So the water may have receded, but the consequences have not. Now, we've been very pleased with the federal response so far, a response that should have nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with political budget debates in Washington, and everything to do with the real needs of families in Paterson, in Lincoln Park, in so many places in Wayne, and so many other places in New Jersey and across this country. Some of these people have to start over, start their lives over. And FEMA, along with other federal, state, and local officials, need the resources necessary not only to move in as quickly as possible to deal with the crisis, but the resources necessary to deal with the aftermath, politics notwithstanding. Because when one community is in trouble, we are all in trouble, and we pull together. Now, frankly, Mr. President, I cannot believe that there are those in this chamber and in the other body who see this as a political opportunity. Those who would focus on the politics of relief, even in the face of families who have watched their lives wash away, their properties in ruins and their communities devastated. Mr. President, New Jersey suffered severe damages and left families already struggling with another challenge. And it's up to all of us to help them. Irene was a powerful storm, but what we have learned is that there is nothing more powerful than what unites us as community. It is in times like these, when families and small businesses trying to recover, that we appreciate the role of professional, well-equipped, well-trained local, state, and federal boots on the ground. In my view, one of the most legitimate and non-debatable roles of government, clearly I've heard many of my colleagues refer to this in a different context, is the security of our people. Well, if you are homeless as a result of a disaster, you have a security problem. And that is to provide a helping hand to its citizen when there's nowhere else to turn. Yes, we have to do all we can to keep our economy moving, create jobs, and reduce the deficit. We have to make cuts where we can, but in the face of disasters, we cannot say no to families who have lost everything. We cannot say no when floodwaters are rising, homes are lost, possessions are piled in the streets, families are picking through the mud to put whatever pieces of their lives they can find together once again. We are not a nation that ties helping them recover to the politics of the moment. We are not a nation that leaves our neighbors alone in the time of tragedy. We don't stand down in times of crisis. We step up. We in New Jersey are grateful to the President for coming to Paterson and to Wayne, and for the rapid and effective response of FEMA and state and local officials after Irene to families who have lost so much. But any attempt to slow relief to these families is, in my view, and in the view of Governor Christie of my state, any attempt to politicize this disaster to advance an ideology at the expense of all that we stand for as a nation is not acceptable. You know, the President said we will do what is necessary to respond. You know, Senator Lautenberg and I took the same view, and Governor Christie took the same view. And we don't want to get into the politics of budget debates or whether this should be offset later on. That's a question for later on. The question right now for people who find themselves without a home to knock on that door is the federal government, the one that I pay my taxes to, the one that I swear an oath of allegiance to every day, is it going to respond to me now? I did not question the need to respond to tornadoes in Joplin, floods in the Dakotas, or terrible consequences of hurricane in Louisiana, or any other place in this country. And I do not expect that my colleagues now will say no to their fellow Americans who need help now in New Jersey and in other states along the East Coast. It is simply not the American way to not support the funds necessary and deal with the challenges these families have now. So, Mr. President, let's keep our eye on the ball. There are families in real need, really struggling in ways that we can't even imagine. And we have a responsibility to put politics aside and do what is right. We have that opportunity very shortly. Let us do what is right. Let us get this money to the federal agencies that can help turn around these people's lives. That's the American way. That's the vote that we have later today. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Louisiana.
I thank the senator from New Jersey for adding his strong and powerful voice to this debate. I wanted to just clarify a few points that I think is important for people to understand. First, for those that might just be engaging or listening in to this debate, we're going to have a vote in about an hour or so, and if we don't get 60 votes, we will likely not be able to replenish the FEMA coffers that are virtually empty. The federal fiscal year, to remind everyone, doesn't start January 1. It starts October 1st. So we run on a fiscal year, not a calendar year. We're coming to the end of our year in September this month. FEMA has run out of money in the last 11 days. I want to submit for the record, this is just an 11-day count, $387 million worth of projects that have been halted because FEMA is stretching the few dollars they have left to cover the emergency needs, literally, of meals and shelter for the people on the East Coast. So in other parts of the country, where there are jobs underway, rebuilding highways, rebuilding libraries, rebuilding schools, rebuilding sewer systems, water systems, et cetera, those projects have been sent a pink slip, basically from Washington, saying cease and desist. You know what the worst thing about that is? It's not necessary. If we would immediately act and refill this coffer, these projects can get started immediately. But what's really, really, really bad about this pink slip is that this put my glasses on here, $387 million worth of projects, many of these projects have already been done by small businesses, private sector contractors. This isn't money owed to the government. This is money in large measure owed to private small business people or medium-sized business people or in some cases large businesses that are in the process of fixing the library. The pink slip in the last 11 days, because of some, ideology here, some sort of party political agenda, they've received a pink slip that says stop work. Now, if these companies who have already purchase the lumber or purchase the concrete or purchase the pipe to build the project don't get paid soon, they will go bankrupt. Believe me, I have companies in my state that have gone bankrupt because the federal government is a notorious late payer, even under good conditions. This is not what I would describe as a good condition. This is a terrible condition. So the other side needs to think about the politics of this. This isn't just a moral question. It is a business question. This question has many dimensions. So you have basically sent a cease and desist order to $387 million worth of contractors and business people who might not be in New Jersey or affected in Vermont, but are working on a project. They have a work order from the federal government. They're doing the money, only to be found out, well, sorry, Congress can't decide how to pay, so good luck trying to make your payroll on Friday. This is wrong. The second argument I would like to make to the other side when you're considering the importance and significant vote on this is this. When the other side says to me, well, we need to budget for it. Well, I'd like to budget for it, but I do not have a crystal ball. I think I'm a pretty good senator, but one thing I don't do really well is predict the future. I sometimes have instincts about it, but I'm not a fortune teller. And you would have to be a fortune teller to see what is happening. I'm going to give you this. This isn't Mary Landrieu's opinion. These are the facts. In 2003, we needed less than $1 billion to fund all disasters. It was a relatively mild year. Had we put $2 billion in the budget, we would have had $1 billion extra. The next year, it jumped to $5 billion. The next year, it went up to $45 billion, broke all records. The next year, it went down to $12 billion. The next year, it fell to $8 billion. How are we on the Appropriations Committee? Danny Inouye is a fabulous chairman from Hawaii, and Thad Cochran is a terrific senator from Mississippi. But neither Thad Cochran or Daniel Inouye can predict a year and a half out what the disasters are going to be and budget accordingly. So even if you can't motivate yourself on some people here to vote for people because they need help, just look at the argument on the finances. You really don't know in advance. Now, we could set aside some money, maybe more than the 1.8 that we have. I don't disagree there. But we still would have missed it every year except for 2. Even if we had put $5 billion in the base budget, we would have still missed it. You just can't predict it. Should we set aside $25 billion every year? Should we set aside? So the point is, when disasters happen, just fund what we've committed to, which is a base benefit package to people. As I said, $2,000. No one is going to get rich off of that. And $30,000 to help people get themselves started. Hopefully their insurance comes in, nonprofits step up to help. They can maybe dig into a little bit of their savings. But this is as much a jobs bill, it's as much a business bill, as it is a bill that is the right moral thing to do for people. And it is not because Democrats don't know how to budget. I am so tired of being lectured on the other side about Democrats don't know how to budget. I'd like to remind everyone the last time this budget was balanced, we had a Democratic president. Democrats can balance budgets. I was a state treasurer for 8 years, and I did a lot to help my state get back on a strong financial footing, and I'm proud of my record, and so is every Democrat here. It's impossible to predict in advance. So what we could do is let's do what we always do, send help, help these companies and help these people, put jobs, put people to work in America, do the right thing. And then over the course of the next 6 months, as our big committee is working, trying to figure out lots of big problems that we have, this is one of them, we can then have time to sit down and figure out, based on this reality, what should we do? And if anyone has a suggestion, please come to the floor now, because my committee has been talking about this for 6 months. And I want to say thanks to my co-chair, Senator Coates, who serves with me on the Homeland Security Appropriations Committee. We've been thinking about this for 6 months, and he voted yes yesterday because he knows There really aren't many good options out there. But can we find a way? Yes, Mr. President. Can we find it this week? No. We might not even be able to find it in the next 30 days, but I'm confident that over the course of the next month and year, we'll find a way to pay for it. But right now, people in New Jersey and Vermont and Louisiana and Missouri and Minnesota and North Dakota don't want to listen to this. They want to tell their kids, yes, we're going to rebuild. They want to tell their employees, yes, we're going to put our business back. They don't need to listen to this, and they shouldn't have to. So I am urging a strong vote at 4:15. Again, we have, in the last 11 days, I want to submit to the record, $387 million worth of projects that have been stopped, and every day this list is going to get bigger and bigger. And all this is another pink slip to someone working at a job in some ways unrelated to what's going on in the current emergency. They're working on emergencies from 3 years ago. And now they're being put out of work because of this bullheadedness that is coming from someplace, and I hope we can break through on that today. And again, these pictures are difficult to see, but I think it's worth seeing them again. This is what people look like that are listening to this debate. This family sitting on those steps, someone, either they or their neighbor, is going to say, did you hear Senator Landrieu on the floor of the Senate, or did you hear the Senate debate? And why would the Senate of the United States be arguing whether we can get aid? Aren't we building Afghanistan and Iraq, and we're not going to build North Carolina? I think they're sitting on the Outer Banks of North Carolina thinking, what is going on in the United States Congress? And people are going to be angry, believe me. And I don't know what you're going to tell them if you vote no on this. You're going to tell them we didn't have the money. You're going to tell them we can't figure out how to budget it. We can figure all that out later. We're going to have to eventually. Every bill that we enter into has to eventually be fully paid for, Mr. President. You know that. But we don't have to decide that this week. So let's tell them yes, let's do the right thing, and let's get help to Joplin, Missouri. Let's get help to our rural communities that sometimes get, very forgotten. Let's get help to our folks in North Carolina and to our people in Texas who have been suffered terribly over this, and let's do it now. Let me just share another quote that I think is particularly significant. The senator from New York talked about Governor Bob McDonnell, a conservative Republican from Virginia. He said, fund it now. Another Republican governor, New Jersey, Governor Chris Christie, said, let's fund it now. It's not a Republican or Democratic issue. But I want to read what Governor Tom Ridge, the former governor of Pennsylvania and the first Secretary of Homeland Security, a staunch Republican, said. Never in the history of the country have we worried about budget around emergency appropriations for natural disasters, and frankly, in my view, we shouldn't be worried about it now. We're all in this as a country, and when Mother Nature devastates a community, we may need emergency appropriations, and we ought to just deal with it and then deal with the fiscal issues later on. I mean, he is a very influential leader in our country and was the first Secretary of Homeland Security. He ran the FEMA budget. He understands what's at stake. So please, let's not make this a partisan issue. Let's get a strong bipartisan vote. The Senate could be very proud of that, and then we'll negotiate these issues with the House. I will work with the House leadership to say, there are several ways we can pay for this. We can debate it over the course of the next, several months and maybe come up with a new way. I'm not sure. I know one thing we can't do is take it out of the Department of Homeland Security. Our budget would be devastated, and it wouldn't be fair to all of the perimeters and the security and our ports and our firefighters and, to use their money to pay for past or present disasters. But we could potentially find the money somewhere under some new mechanism. But let's not make the people of the East Coast the scapegoat and the people of Joplin, Missouri, the people of Louisiana in the floods that we've just gone through ourselves, and we'll figure out there's time for debate later, but the time for action is now. Mr. President, I don't see anyone else here to debate. I'd like to yield the floor, but I'm sorry, Senator Lautenberg, I didn't see you. I'm sorry. Senator from New Jersey is here, so let me yield the floor, and I thank the Senate for their accommodation.
Mr. President.
The Senator from New Jersey.
I ask unanimous consent to be able to speak for up to 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I listened carefully to our colleague from Louisiana and note a particular distinction that her state brings, and that is the number of natural disaster problems that state has had, and how diligently Senator Landrieu has fought to make sure that when we have a problem, that we ask the government with a clear conscience to do their share in helping us cure the problem that we get. On Sunday, just passed, we marked the 10th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist acts. On that terrible day, 10 years ago, we were reminded that when tragedy strikes one part of our country, Americans pull together to respond. When our enemies and Mother Nature sends us their worst, Americans are at our best. In the wake of recent storms across the country, including Hurricane Irene in my state of New Jersey, we see and search for the American spirit of cooperation coming through. Unfortunately, we learn that the spirit of helping neighbors stops with our Republican colleagues. We saw a shameful display when all but a handful of Republican senators voted to block consideration of an emergency disaster relief bill. They chose not to let our government do its share in curing a problem that enveloped much of the country. They've chosen to use disaster relief victims as pawns in their political games. And we don't make any mistakes. The disaster relief bill is a critical lifeline to the families who are struggling to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives after Hurricane Irene. The early estimates suggest that this violent storm could be one of the 10 costliest storms in U.S. history, with damages that exceed $10 billion. This is some of the worst flooding in a century, and it is a serious, serious emergency. Hurricane Irene produced devastating floods in New Jersey and other states along the East Coast. A major tropical storm followed days later, causing even more damage. In New Jersey alone, at least 11 people were killed and countless families were displaced after their homes were destroyed. President Obama has declared the entire state of New Jersey, all 21 counties, a federal disaster area. Earlier this month, the President came to New Jersey to see firsthand the destruction that Hurricane Irene has caused. Now, I joined him on his tour of Paterson, New Jersey, my hometown, and one of the cities hit hardest by flooding. We witnessed unforgettable images. The streets and sidewalks were covered in mud, and inside homes, I saw it personally, mud covered the second floor of some houses. That's how deep the water got. 14-foot crests followed what at times were very tepid streams. Walls were stained by high water marks. The picture here shows some of the damage in the city of Paterson. Perhaps it's difficult to see, but what we're looking at is water everywhere, and it's enveloping homes and businesses and the community entirely. And Paterson's not alone. This is the same scene in Boonton, New Jersey, where you see that the road is washed away here, and people can't move from one part of the town to the other. In Cranford, New Jersey, we see another scene like this. Here we have what looks like debris piled up. This debris, Mr. President, was furniture. It included beds, it included cribs, it included refrigerators, it includes all kinds of things. People putting their wares out on the front lawn, furniture never to be able to be used again. The houses themselves often not be able to be entered again. And this picture shows the damage in Bound Brook, New Jersey. The high level of the water as it compares to the buildings that are constructed there. With Hurricane Irene, we witnessed nature's power to destroy. And now it's time to see the federal government's capacity to repair, build and rebuild and restore. And even before this hurricane struck, FEMA's primary source of funding for cleanup and recovery, the Disaster Relief Fund, was barely on life support. The tornadoes and flooding that wreaked havoc across our Midwest and South earlier this year, along with wildfires and other disasters, depleted the funds. And that's why, in my role as Vice Chairman of the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee, I helped to craft a bill to replenish the Disaster Relief Fund. The Appropriations Committee approved this bill last week, and the Majority Leader, Harry Reid, understood the urgency of the situation and brought emergency disaster relief funding legislation to the floor right away for us to consider putting the money into the relief fund so that we can deal with the tragedy that hit so many people in so many places. But yesterday, what happened here in the Senate? Republicans filibustered our attempts. Now, everybody, I think, across America has learned about what the word filibuster means. It means just stopping things, blocking things. Blocked our attempts to even allow an emergency disaster relief bill to be considered. What kind of foul play is that? They talk about saving money. They talk about cuts. It's outrageous. Some of them have claimed that the bill would cost too much. But we all know that the widespread damage that occurred demands a strong federal response. We've got to provide FEMA with the resources it needs to help New Jersey's people, businesses, communities recover and rebuild from this disaster. But this bill also helps disaster victims in all 50 states, not just the states impacted by Hurricane Irene. Every state has experienced disaster in recent years, and FEMA is working in every state to help these communities rebuild and recover. So if we fail to pass this bill, every state is going to suffer, because if we can't help one state, we can't help any states, and that is an unacceptable condition. The fact is that the victims of Hurricane Irene and other recent disasters have enough to worry about. They shouldn't have to also wonder if their government is going to stand behind them. I want to be clear. The federal government plays the critical role in disaster relief efforts. We have a responsibility to provide funding to help communities rebuild and to make sure that the job gets done well. The federal government, for decades, has a track record of extending a helping hand to victims of natural disasters. This includes more than $11 billion in emergency funding to help Texas, Alabama, Louisiana, and other states recover from hurricanes and flooding in 2008. Last year, we approved more than $5 billion in emergency funding to help states like Tennessee and Kentucky recover from floods. And people in these states desperately needed our help, and Congress responded. And we got to do the same thing now. It's really hard to understand why people on the Republican side in the House and in the Senate here just don't step up to their responsibilities. And what are those responsibilities? Those responsibilities are to protect and secure the safety of our people. Without that, the country isn't quite what it should be by a long shot. We've got to do what we have to now. And as we fight our way out of recession, no time to play politics and penalize people who are struggling. Moments like this demand shared sacrifice. We face serious challenges in our country. But can we put a price on a human life and say, well, if it costs a lot over there, we're not going to do that to save people? Then nothing is more important than keeping our families and our economy, our communities safe. So I call on my colleagues, put aside the Republican cloak. Put aside the savings that we think we can make from avoiding our responsibilities, because no money is going to be saved. No money is going to be saved. The cost is going to be there, and the misery is going to be extended. So I urge you, let's all join in approving this bill. Few of us, if any, are exempt from the possibility of a disaster in our states. So let's put the politics aside. Make sure our first priority is helping people, helping individuals, helping families, helping the communities, and keeping functions going to permit our society to work. With that, Mr. President, I close out on my comments and with the wonderment that we've seen, with the hard shell, heartless attitude about providing FEMA with money to repair the results of disaster. It's almost incomprehensible. We heard a cry from one of the leaders on the Republican side in the House to say, well, we first have to find the money to pay for it. Like the devil we do. We don't do that when we see forests being ravaged by fire. We don't do it when we're attacked by outside enemies. We don't do it at those times. And, Mr. President, we ought not to do it. Now, with that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Hampshire.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak for up to 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you. I join my colleague, Senator Lautenberg, and the others who have come to the floor this afternoon to talk about the importance of getting help for people who have been hit by disasters. A little more than 2 weeks ago, Tropical Storm Irene came barreling through New Hampshire, just as she came barreling through Vermont and New York and New Jersey and North Carolina and so many other states along the East Coast. The storm dumped as much as 8 inches of rain in parts of New Hampshire, and the damage to property and infrastructure, especially in the northern part of our state, was significant. The surging waters and high winds destroyed roads and bridges, damaged thousands of homes, left nearly 200,000 without power, devastated businesses, and ruined crops. Now, while the devastation was terrible, I want to begin by commending those dedicated first responders and emergency personnel who kept our residents safe and well-informed throughout the storm. I'm also grateful for the tireless work of road crews, utility workers, and volunteers from across New Hampshire who began helping families and communities rebuild just as soon as the storm passed. Their hard work and community spirit are deeply appreciated. For many of the towns who were hit by Irene, this is the 3rd major flooding event of the year. It's the 7th in the last 2 years. And these have been devastating floods. I have a picture here of the town of Plymouth, a beautiful community in northern New Hampshire where Plymouth State University is. And what we can see barely in this section of the picture, is the new ice hockey arena for Plymouth State that was just completed about a year ago. Beautiful state-of-the-art arena that unfortunately got flooded by these floodwaters. And of course, we can see other damage to the town. Many of the homeowners in the community of Conway, on the other side of the state, those people who suffered some of the worst damage are elderly and disabled. They're people who are living on fixed incomes who are least able to recover from this kind of disaster. Others affected by the disaster are families who are already struggling to cope with difficult economic circumstances. New Hampshire emergency response officials toured Conway today, and they talked to our office and told us about the plight of one young family of 3. The father, sadly, was laid off from his job just 3 days before the storm hit, and his wife, who stays at home and takes care of their 3-year-old, doesn't have a job outside the home, so with his layoff, they've lost their entire income, and now their home is so damaged that they're worried about being homeless. They have no money to rebuild. Without FEMA assistance, this family could indeed wind up homeless. Hundreds in the West Lebanon area, on the western part of the state across the river from Vermont, may be out of work for months. Peg Howard, who owns a boutique gift store in the area, told the Valley News, which is the newspaper that serves Lebanon, that she fears damage from Irene will put her out of business. As a small business owner, she has no parent corporation to help her recover, so assistance from FEMA and other federal programs may be her only option as she tries to rebuild her business. Peg and the hundreds of others in New Hampshire, the thousands across the country who have been devastated, are taxpayers, and this is their government. They help pay for it. Their tax dollars help fund our government, including FEMA. They have the right to expect that FEMA will be there when they need help. It's not only sad, but it's an outrage that some members of Congress would deny those people who have been so hard hit by Irene and so many other disasters this year. Members of Congress would deny them help in their time of need. And for no good reason. The reason is pure partisan politics. It's plain and simple. Even in the best of circumstances, the costs of Irene would be a significant burden for New Hampshire to shoulder alone. Thankfully, President Obama quickly granted Governor Lynch's request for a major disaster declaration. A number of federal agencies, including FEMA, are now on the ground providing essential assistance as we begin to restore our state's homes, businesses, roads, and utilities. But New Hampshire's hardly alone in the need for assistance after Hurricane Irene, and other parts of the country are still rebuilding from disasters earlier this year, such as the devastating tornado in Joplin, Missouri. Soon, FEMA's Disaster Relief Fund, as we've already heard this afternoon, which was already running low prior to the storm, will no longer have the resources needed to continue meeting recovery needs. In the last 2 weeks, FEMA has spent $300 million providing relief to states hit by Hurricane Irene. Less than $500 million remains, which may not be enough to see us through the end of the month. New Hampshire and the other states still recovering from disasters would be on their own if that happens. We can't let that happen. We must act quickly to provide FEMA with the resources it needs to help our citizens and our towns recover. In northern New England, we have a limited window to rebuild before the onset of winter brings our construction season to a stop. What's more, in New Hampshire, fall is a critical season for our tourism industry, as thousands of visitors come to take in the beautiful fall foliage. We need to immediately rebuild the bridges that Irene destroyed, such as this one that's pictured in Hart's location. And you can see in another couple of weeks this beautiful mountain in the background with all of the green foliage will be turning all sorts of colors because of the fall foliage. And if we can't fix this road and bridges and the number of other places in New Hampshire, we won't be able to have a tourist season that can bring people to the state, that can help those people whose jobs depend on that tourism industry. Any delay in FEMA assistance over the next few weeks could have a serious effect on recovery efforts and the hundreds of businesses and their employees who depend on the tourism industry. You know, Mr. President, I know you agree with me and with the other senators who have come to the floor this afternoon who believe that natural disasters should be beyond politics and beyond partisanship. The people hurting all across this country aren't Democrats or Republicans or independents. They're citizens. They're taxpayers. Getting them the help that they need demands bipartisan cooperation. In the past, we've always been able to come together and get people the help they need. This time should be no different. I urge all of my colleagues in the Senate to work together to address this emergency, to provide FEMA the resources it needs to carry out its mission. This has an immediate, real impact on so many Americans, and we can't delay. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I yield the floor. And note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Anna.
Thank you. I asked the quorum call. Are we in a quorum call?
We are.
I'd like to dispense with the quorum.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I had to slip away from the floor for just a few minutes, and I understand that no one from the other side has come down to speak this afternoon. I can't say I blame them because it's a very tough position to take. We're getting ready to take a very important vote in just 5 minutes on whether we're going to provide disaster relief for the country, and particularly for the East Coast that's been so terribly hit with Hurricane Irene, and then, of course, Tropical Storm Lee that came up through the Gulf Coast, and you know we've had our share of difficulty. But then it dumped additional rain in an area that was already saturated. We have wildfires raging in Texas. We have the destruction still in Joplin, Missouri, and other places throughout the Midwest. And the question is, for Americans in all of these states, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and some that are totally unaffiliated with the political process, is Congress going to help? And our answer today needs to be yes. We need to fill the FEMA coffers that are empty. Our fiscal year ends this month. So FEMA was given a certain amount of money in the earlier part of this year. The end of the year is coming up, Madam President, and they're virtually out of money. I submitted only 30 minutes ago to the record, in the last 11 days, $387 million of ongoing construction projects for past disasters have been put on hold so that FEMA can stretch those dollars to make sure that people can eat in the shelters and at least have one set of clothes to wear in other parts of the country. This is unheard of in our nation. We have never, ever gotten so low in our disaster account. Now, there's plenty money in the account to rebuild Iraq. There's plenty money in the account to rebuild Afghanistan. There's money in accounts for refugee camps all over the world. But the account for Americans that are homeless, desperate, and without their businesses, their churches, and in some cases their neighborhoods is empty, and members are going to come to the floor today and vote no. I strongly suggest a yes vote. Now, I said the reason we can't budget exactly for these things is because we, A, don't know when they're going to happen. We don't even know the amounts of the damage. And as I have shown in my arguments this afternoon, the amount wildly fluctuates. 1 year, it's zero over the last 10 years. 1 year, it was zero. The next year, it was $5 billion. The next year, 1 year, it was $8 billion. The next year, it was $43 billion. So I am saying no one here, we're all very good, very powerful people, but we're not fortune tellers. And we don't have crystal balls on our desk. And so there's no way that we can know. Now, when people say to me, well, you don't know exactly, but could you budget something? The answer is yes. We could figure that out, but we don't have to figure that out today. We don't even have to figure that out this month. We have this super committee set up to fix every problem in the world, it seems like. We'll just give them another one to work on, because we've been working on this on the Appropriations Committee for some time. The White House is engaged. The Republican leadership hopefully will get engaged. The Democratic leadership is engaged, and we'll figure it out. But now is not the time to have the victims of these disasters and survivors of these disasters worry about this. We need to refill FEMA's coffers, refill the Corps of Engineers that are stretched beyond imagination at this time. You can imagine with the Mississippi River, the highest flooding in 50 years occurred this year. Now they've got other flash floods all over the country, a bridge here, several bridges there, dams and dikes bursting. One of the governors, I understand, just shut down a major bridge because they found a structural fault. So the Corps of Engineers has more than they can say grace over. Now is not the time to cut their budget. Now is the time to give them additional funding and do some reform of the Corps of Engineers that my people are crying for in Louisiana. I think a picture is worth 1,000 words. I know we're getting ready to vote, and the leader will come and, I guess, call for the vote. But a picture is worth 1,000 words. These are people that are desperate. I've showed this picture this afternoon. This is Joplin, Missouri. This is somewhere along the Mississippi River in the Great Flood. How lonely is this? I said at least in Joplin you could find a neighbor that you could talk to, or, you know, a group of people worshipped at a church that's gone and you could pray together. This family is isolated, as many of our rural communities. They need to hear a yes from us this afternoon, not a no. Here's Texas, and this just breaks my heart. I think this is North Carolina. I mean, how sad are these pictures? And they're real. And behind them are thousands of families and businesses. And in addition, if this argument of compassion doesn't move people, maybe the argument of just flat business will move people. And if we're ready for the vote, then I think the time has come for the vote at 4:15. I'd like to urge my colleagues, please, to vote yes on this motion to proceed. And if we get 60 votes, we can proceed to the disaster bill and figure out how to pay for it sometime in the next months ahead. And I thank the chair.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the motion to proceed to H.J. Resolution 66, a joint resolution approving the renewal of import restrictions contained in the Burmese Freedom and Democracy Act of 2003, signed by 17 senators.
By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that debate on the motion to proceed to H.J. Res. 66, an act approving the renewal of import restrictions contained in the Burmese Freedom and Democracy Act of 2003 shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayotte, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Baucus, Mr. Begich, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Bingaman, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blunt, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Boxer, Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, Mr. Brown of Ohio, Mr. Burr, Ms. Cantwell, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Dement, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mr. Franken, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Hatch, Mr. Heller, Mr. Hoeven, Mrs. Hutchison, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Inouye, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kerry. Mr. Kirk. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Cole. Mr. Kyle. Ms. Landrieu. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Lee. Mr. Levin. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Manchin. Mrs. McCaskill. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Ms. Mikulski. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Senators voting in the affirmative: Baucus, Bingaman, Franken, Kerry, Landrieu, Leahy, Nelson of Florida, Reed of Rhode Island, Shaheen, Udall of New Mexico, and Vitter. Senators voting in the negative: Ayotte, Burr, Cornyn, Crapo, Dement, Isaacson, McConnell, and Wicker. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, aye. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, aye. Mr. Rockefeller, aye. Mr. Paul? No. Mr. Paul? No. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, no. Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed of Nevada, aye. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Lugar, no. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, no. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Merkley, aye. Mr. Kirk. Mr. Kirk, no. Mr. Coburn, no. Mr. Enzi. No. Mr. Enzi, no. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johans, no. Mr. Blunt, aye. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Inouye, aye. Mr. Cochran. Mr. Cochran, no. Mr. Kyle, no. Mr. Portman, no. Mr. Heller, aye. Webb. Mr. Webb, aye. Mrs. Murray. Mrs. Murray, aye. Yes. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Grassley, no. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Toomey, aye. Blumenthal.